Injustice, we think police brutality or the criminal justice system. But what about our air and water? Environmental racism. It's about policies and practices that discriminate against communities of color by making them live near landfills, sewage plants, and other polluting facilities. And while poverty has a lot to do with it, the leading environmental justice expert told me this.
Racism trumps class. Even middle-income African Americans are more likely to live in more polluted neighborhoods.
In fact, one study found that Black Americans making $50,000 to $60,000 a year are more likely to live in polluted neighborhoods than white Americans who make just $10,000 a year. Flint, Michigan is a textbook case of environmental racism. It's where 100,000 residents have been poisoned with toxic water contaminated by high levels of lead. Why? Because the state was trying to save a buck. Flint is around 57% Black, with 40% of its population living in poverty. Residents protested the dirty water for over a year, but were ignored. And that's how environmental racism plays out. Minority communities have much less political clout, so regulators can and often do ignore them. And not far from Flint is Detroit, where 83% of the population is Black. It's home to the most polluted zip code in Michigan.
Zip code is the most powerful predictor of health. And all communities and all zip codes are not created equal.
Southwest Detroit is surrounded by a lot of industry, like salt mining, steel production, tar sands oil refining, and coal burning. And that's meant that 1.6 million pounds of chemicals enter that community yearly. Not coincidentally, Wayne County, where Detroit is, has the highest number of children's asthma cases in the state. But look, environmental racism isn't just a Michigan story. It's an American story. Take, for example, Louisiana's Cancer Alley, an 85-mile stretch along the Mississippi River. It's known for its over 200 petrochemical plants and a high rate of cancer, mainly among Black residents. So, is there anyone protecting folks from environmental racism? Well, there's supposed to be. The Environmental Protection Agency has a special department called the Office of Civil Rights. But in its 22-year history, the office has never formally found a single case of discrimination. In fact, more than 90% of communities that make complaints find them rejected or dismissed. On top of that, the Guardian newspaper recently revealed that U.S. authorities across the country are deliberately distorting water tests in cities like Detroit and Philadelphia to minimize the reported amount of lead in the water. Environmental racism, while not always the most visible form, is also widespread. So, when is enough enough?
So there's a lot to be said about that video. You can see that in these areas where Black people, Negro, or they call themselves African American, where they live, where they're forced to live, companies set up these toxic facilities and in turn poison the people in the surrounding areas. It's just that simple. Now what I should be showing you is I should show you this Farrakhan audio that I listened to the other night, which Farrakhan explained colonization is just a means of creating a market and then sucking all the resources out of the market, with people controlling the civilians in that market, claiming to be for the benefit of them when they're really devouring the resources to send back to their quote-unquote motherland, the Queen or the Pope, however you view it. And this is what's happened to America. Now, I'm showing you environmental racism. There is nothing that says this is Black oriented except for the material that is within the video. When I click here,
of environmental racism. It's where 100,000 residents have been poisoned with toxic water contaminated by high levels of lead. Why? Because the state was trying to save a buck. Flint is around 57% black with...
Now, the video explains that this is divided by race through area code, meaning they placed you in an area code you were born into. Your families were born into this. You've pretty much been, most of you, been living where your family's been born for hundreds of years. They already put you in this area code. They put a delegate over you to always make sure you fail. To always make sure you have crumbs. Now I'm going to show you something, because now I'm going to show you the black half and I'm going to show you the white half. And we're going to see where they meet in the middle. We're going to see if it's friendly in the middle. Take away all preconceived thoughts of what I'm going to show you. I told you it's time. It is time. It is time. There's a clock going off in your spine right now. It's not in your head, it's in your spine. It is time.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. As we promised you last night, tonight, an all-in exclusive.
See, in the post-racial world, it's Obama who sees race.
Obviously, race relations in this country have come a long way. We just elected a black president, our first.
And I've always made the argument over several years now that America, in fact, before the election of Barack Obama, that we are in a post-racial America.
It's getting tiring. We have a black president. We have black senators. We have black heads of captains of business companies. We have black entertainment channels. Where is there racism? I don't think there's racism.
You hear it all the time these days. The notion the country's election and re-election of a black president represents a final break with racial harms. That because of this one man, Barack Obama, the country's racial history has been redeemed, and we are all living in a new country, in a new era, untainted by all that unpleasantness from before. Well, in an epic and masterful and highly controversial essay that everyone is talking about, perhaps the greatest essayist of our time, in the cover piece for The Atlantic called The Case for Reparations, Ta-Nehisi Coates. As Ta-Nehisi Coates writes, an America that asks what it owes its most vulnerable citizens is improved and humane. An America that looks away is ignoring not just the sins of the past, but the sins of the present and the certain sins of the future. Coates traces the long, dark history of the economic plunder and exploitation that are essential features of America's tradition of white supremacy and racial hierarchy, not just in the days of slavery, or the days of Reconstruction, or the lynching era of the Jim Crow South, but up in the North in the boom years after the Second World War.
Now listen. People always tell you, oh, blacks give up. They don't want to get ahead. Pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. You know, Farrakhan makes a good point. He says, they say to you, pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. And they made all these subsidies for the land giveaways. They're telling you in one hand at the same time, within the same 10-year bracket, we're going to give you 40 acres and a mule. At the same time, they're letting Caucasians that come over here from other Caucasus lands pick and choose large, vast areas of the West with manifest destiny. You don't even have 1 acre, and they've been given all your land.
Where government policy, private action, and even mob violence all worked to destroy black wealth. What this essay does is tell a story about debt that has been accrued.
See, we're talking black wealth here. We're not talking about poor ghetto niggas no more. We're talking about black wealth.
Writes, an America that asks what it owes its most vulnerable citizens is improved and humane. An America that looks away is ignoring not just the sins of the past, but the sins of the present and the certain sins of the future.
Because history repeats itself. Now listen one more time.
Coates. As Ta-Nehisi Coates writes, an America that asks what it owes its most vulnerable citizens is improved and humane. An An America that looks away is ignoring not just the sins of the past, but the sins of the present and the certain sins of the future. This is the long, dark history of the economic plunder and exploitation that are essential features of America's tradition of white supremacy and racial hierarchy, not just in the days of slavery, or the days of Reconstruction, or the lynching era of the Jim Crow South, but up in the North in the boom years after the Second World War, where government...
Now, let's take a little break here. Let's look at this again. Every time we see these pictures, black people working, right?
Hierarchy, not just in the days of slavery, or the
only time we see white people is when they're standing around in their enjoyment, watching black people hang. Never forget this. History repeats itself.
Codes. As Ta-Nehisi Coates writes, an America that asks what it owes its most vulnerable citizens is improved and humane. An America that looks away is ignoring not just the sins of the past, but the sins of the present and the certain sins of the future. Coates traces the long, dark history of the economic plunder and exploitation that are essential features of America's tradition of white supremacy and racial hierarchy, not just in the days of slavery, or the days of Reconstruction, or the lynching era of the Jim Crow South, but up in the North in the boom years after the Second World War, where government policy, private action, and even mob violence all worked to destroy black wealth. What this essay does is tell a story about debt that has been accrued, a real monetary debt, the displacement of wealth from one group of people used to fatten the pockets of another group of people. It's about America's tendency to not see an injustice as an injustice when the perpetrators get away with it for enough time.
For enough time. 400 years. We controlled this land and it blossomed. Now this land is dying because of cement. Because you know why.
Debt that has been accrued. A real monetary debt, the displacement of wealth from one group of people used to fatten the pockets of another group of people.
Now, do you understand that? That means somebody was wealthy. That wealth was taken from them. And Caucasians benefited from the theft of that wealth.
It's about America's tendency to not see an injustice as an injustice when the perpetrators get away with it for enough time. For Coates to ignore the fact that one of the oldest republics in the world was erected on a foundation of white supremacy, to pretend the problems of a dual society are the same as the problems of unregulated capitalism, is to cover the sin of national plunder with the sin of national lying.
Sin of national plunder. To cover up plunder with lying. A whole nation of liars. It's equal. It's fair. It's your fault because you're lazy. This is what they say to you, right?
For enough time. For Coates to ignore the fact that one of the oldest republics in the world was erected on a foundation of white supremacy.
This whole country stands on white supremacy. It needs your black ass in cages as its foundation. If you're not here, they either have to use poor whites in your place or other nations. Other nations will say, fuck it, I'll go home. You are the foundation. You are the spine of this country. These men are spineless liars. They'll happily come at you with the sword. They'll happily come at you with misdirection. They never come to you with honesty. Never.
To pretend the problems of a dual society are the same as the problems of unregulated capitalism is to cover the sin of national plunder with the sin of national lying.
Even this man, who is very well... See, I'm an idiot. This man's very well studied. Not the reporter that's reading it. The work of the workman. Ta-Nehisi Coates. He can even see we live in a dual society. He doesn't need to say the Liberty Bell. There is no liberty here for us. And there will not be. $1 million check to each of you is not enough for what has happened. And don't even think they'll give you $1 million. They'll give you like $33,000 and call it reparations. They think you're a joke. But they know it's serious to keep you contained. They know the only way to keep you contained is to keep you dumbed down chemically.
And there's nothing more anathema to the current conservative conversation on race than that inconvenient truth. And joining me now is the one and only Ta-Nehisi Coates. Congratulations on the essay.
Thank you.
You've been working on. You and I have been talking about this essay for 2 years. As you've been working about
on the other show.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Since I was on up. So let's start out with what's the case? What's the argument in a nutshell for people that have not read the essay? Like, what do you want people to walk away with?
Well, the basic feature is really, really simple. Defining our relationship between Black America and white America is taking, is plunder, is stealing. And this is obviously true, I mean, most explicitly in slavery, a period of 250 years. But it continues after enslavement, into debt, peonage, and sharecropping, into racial terrorism, where you're talking about the season.
Debt peonage. Debt peonage. This is a word you're unfamiliar with. You're unfamiliar with it because I'm unfamiliar with it. Debt peonage. Somebody sent me that a month ago. I was like, I'm uninterested. It does not make my saliva drip out of my mouth. I'm not drooling over debt peonage because I didn't understand it.
50 years, but it continues after enslavement, into debt.
How many people really understand what the Jim Crow laws are? We're all equal, you're free, but you can't buy a house in this neighborhood because white people live there. You must dwell in the area code set up.
Peonage and sharecropping in the South, into racial terrorism, where you're talking about the seizing of people's bodies, through some of the most progressive policy that we erected during the 20th century, through our housing legislation, through our GI Bill. Basically, it's just a defining feature in terms of how the two communities have related in our history.
You tell the story in the beginning. I mean, I think this is a really important point, because I think one of the ways we think about, I'll speak for myself. One way I had sort of been brought up to think about race and racism was as a problem of exclusion, of hatred, of people saying and doing mean things, of doing horrible, violent things, and of constraining people's freedom. Right? You couldn't go to that water fountain. You couldn't.
Constraining, marginalizing. You're not permitted to cross this barrier while everyone else is. Now, I need you to comprehend this. You're not allowed to work in that skyscraper. You'll make too much money and make big decisions based upon your flesh. Whether it's a whoring or whether it's fight for your people. That's dangerous in their eyes. You understand the power of relationships, right? You understand the power of relationships with the opposite sex, right? When both people are in power, but a sexual relationship can still persist. They do not want black businessmen mingling with white business women that lead corporations. Not only will you F her, you will F that corporation. What happens when the Negro that's involved in those situations reaches the not fair moment from something that he sees dwelling within the corporations? Oh, that's not fair that corporation's doing that. That's affecting the people. Baby, we should change that. They do not want powerful black businessmen in suits near powerful white businesswomen in control. They know what's going to happen. It's a train wreck for white supremacy. This means the white woman that controls this building will now hire more blacks than they were before. This means that's a foot across the marginalization. This is what they do not want to happen in society.
Of people saying and doing mean things, of doing horrible, violent things, and of constraining people's freedom. Right? You couldn't go to that water fountain, you couldn't go to that pool, and that was the injury. And you really put a lot of emphasis on this, on the fact that actually, no, it was taking stuff. Taking stuff was the core feature. Plunder.
That is what plundering is. If you go and you snatch something from someone, they want it back, they reach their hands for it back, you hold up a rock, I'll bash your fucking face. This is mine now. That is plunder. These people plundered you with their muskets.
Story of a guy named Clyde Ross. This is from the video that came out with the essay. This is Clyde Ross. Take a listen.
My name is Clyde Ross. I was born in Clarksville, Mississippi. I bought this house in 1958. We'll pay $26,000 and the house was worth $12,000. That means I was overcharged quite a bit.
So, the house was worth $12,000 and he paid $26,000. Hey, let's do simple math. 12 plus 12, that's double, right? 12 and 12 is 24. He paid $26,000. That's beyond unfair, right? Let's hear Clyde again.
Tell the story of a guy named Clyde Ross. This is from the video that came out with the essay. This is Clyde Ross. Take a listen.
My name is Clyde Ross. I was born in Clarksville, Mississippi. I bought this house in 1958. We'll pay $26,000 and the house was worth $12,000.
Now, don't you see a mathematical problem? 12 and 12 is 24. You not only doubled the price to sell to a black man, you added $2 more thousand. You understand in what do you say, 58? How hard it was for a Negro to be able to save $10,000? Let alone $12,000? Let alone $26,000? Back then, in the day of hang people and picnic around them and eat a lunch? Group photo around the person we just hung and burned? And there's pieces missing. That's the weird thing. Pieces missing. As if somebody just had to taste.
Tell the story of a guy named Clyde Ross. This is from the video that came out with the essay. This is Clyde Ross. Take a listen.
My name is Clyde Ross. I was born in Clarksville, Mississippi. I bought this house in 1958. We'll pay $26,000 and the house was worth $12,000. That means I was overcharged quite a bit. We have been cheated out of the right to be human beings in a society.
This is him in 69, alright? This is a younger version of him telling you we've been cheated out of the right.
$6,000 and the house was worth $12,000. That means I was overcharged quite a bit. We have been cheated out of the right to be human beings in a society. We have been cheated out of buying homes at a decent price.
I don't even want to be a human being in this society. I want to leave society and be the man I was born to be. You don't belong here. You belong with me. I'm going to start in the desert. There's plenty of room for each and every one of you beside me. Each and every one of you. It's one rule. Serve the entity that created us all. That's not that hard, right? No. Let's listen to some more of this.
That's Clyde Ross. He started down in Mississippi, and you tell the story of the plunder, just one individual person, the plunder he experienced. Tell me that story. It starts with a horse.
Yeah. Well, it starts with Clyde Ross. Let me just say, one of the, I think, unfortunate things that happens when we have this discussion is that there's a focus on poverty, as though African Americans who are quote-unquote working class, middle class, and have things are not themselves subject to plunder. And you really see the opposite of that in the case of Clyde Ross, where they had a farm, they had mules, they had cows, they had chickens. All of it was taken from them.
This is back in Mississippi.
Back in Mississippi in the 1920s, and Clyde Ross grew up under a situation where basically white folks in Mississippi could take when they wanted to take, right down to his horse, his only possession as a child.
Explain, like what? Like they just showed up one day?
They literally just showed up one day and said, we want that horse, and they took his horse and they put it on the racetrack. Yeah.
So, do you understand that? He's on his own property. He's free, right? Right? And these people are able to come and steal from him, and then put the horse on a racetrack, a public racetrack, to try to make money. Do you understand that?
Yeah. And it got much worse than that. His brother, for instance, who had epilepsy, had an epileptic fit in town. They took him and they put him in Parchment Prison. And anybody that knows anything about Parchment Prison understands that it's essentially 20th century slavery at that point in time. Never saw his brother again, could never even recover the body.
So he is raised in a world, this is in the 1920s, in Mississippi, with a family that has some assets, in which those assets, up to and including the human life of the family member,
right,
can be at any moment
seized.
White people can show up and say, yoink.
Right, basically.
That's ours.
Yoink.
Don't they say that today? But they have a court order or a warrant. It's the same mentality. Anytime they want, they fucking pillage you. B.B. King died with all that money. And what'd they do? They confiscated his music and his money so that it couldn't be passed down to his family members. Do you guys even know anything about that? You see, that's what you don't understand. These black entertainers, they get in bed with these entities, and their possessions are the entities. Their money is the entities. There is nothing that these black children, who are the descendants of rich actors and musicians, there's nothing that they can do.
Up to and including the human life of the family member,
right,
can be at any moment
seized.
White people can show up and say, yoink.
Right, basically.
That's ours.
Yoink is the thesis of the story, basically.
Yes, that's right, yes.
That should have been our headline.
That should have been the headline, right. Yoink. Right? Because, and eventually, that is precisely the thing that pushes him up to the north.
That's right, that's right.
There's a great line in there, what he's seeking is the protection of law.
The protection of law, which is the first thing he said to me, and I did not understand what he was saying. And then when he outlined, what was going on in the South, which is no black lawyers, no black judges, no black prosecutors, no black people with any sort of stake in the...
You know you're not going to find any black police officers in the South at that time. A white man comes up and takes your dinner table, loads it on a truck, shotgun to your face. Who do you complain to? Need you to understand what's going on. They see your daughter. They want your daughter. They come up and snatch her. Your dad says no. They put a shotgun hole in his chest. There's nothing any of the rest of your family members can do. Nothing.
This is the thing that pushes him up to the north.
That's right. That's right.
There's a great line in there, what he's seeking is the protection of law.
The protection of law, which is the first thing he said to me, and I did not understand what he was saying. And then when he outlined, what was going on in the South, which is no black lawyers, no black judges, no black prosecutors, no black people with any sort of stake in the legal process at all, with any sort of positions of power in the state. That's no law if you're black. He comes to the north and he thinks he's going to get away with that. You know, on some level there is a change. I don't want to undersell that. But he came to the north at a time when home buying was effectively being subsidized by the federal government. We think that, our, idea of home ownership, the suburbs, that this is something that, is a matter of just rugged individualism. But the government engineered this, except for black people. And Clyde Ross was a part of that generation of folks who had jobs, was working a job, ended up working 3 jobs, and could not get a legitimate mortgage to buy a home.
Federal Housing Authority basically invented redlining. Redlining being, they were literally red maps. Federal Housing Authority said, we will not underwrite mortgages in these neighborhoods.
Zip code, right? This is why I showed you the environmental racism first. They put your ass, they said sequester you in one area. Then in the areas surrounding you, they sell those areas off to corporations to come and build companies. The more toxic, the better in their mind. Because your future generations will be poisoned. Isn't that what happened in Flint, Michigan?
Because there are black people.
That's right there. And then that practice then spread out into the private industry, which, didn't need much of a push. It's more of a collusion, in fact. And themselves, even without, the push from the government, said, we will not give loans to black people. And I just want to,
So now, you're not going to get a good mortgage because of the zip code. You're not going to get a loan because they know with the loan, you're going to move out of that area.
Neighborhoods because there are black people.
That's right there. And then that practice then spread out into the private industry. Folks who had jobs, was working a job, ended up working 3 jobs, and could not get a legitimate mortgage to buy a home.
Federal Housing Authority basically invented redlining. Redlining being, they were literally red maps. Federal Housing Authority said, we will not underwrite mortgages in these neighborhoods because there are black people.
That's right there. And then that practice then spread out into the private industry, which, didn't need much of a push. It's more of a collusion, in fact. And themselves, even without, the push from the...
Collusion. There's that word again. Remember the Smithsonian, the government, science was in collusion to hide pre-Columbian artifacts, right? Because Columbus discovered the New World, and all these niggas sitting in it.
And I just want to, push this point.
So this isn't private banks and shit like that. This is the government saying we will not give loans to black people, and then writing it into law. So then you elect a politician that's going to benefit, your area, and their job is to sit on their fucking hands. They get paid to let lobbyists, they get paid by lobbyists to argue for corporations to come in and fuck up your area, poison you more. They get paid big bucks. They make a little bit money in their office job. And on back-end deals, they make buku money. Poisoning you.
Black people. That's right there. And then that practice then spread out into the private industry, which, didn't need much of a push. It's more of a collusion, in fact. And themselves, even without, the push from the government, said, we will not give loans to black people. And I just want to, push this point home. That didn't just affect black people. It affected white people. If you are an individual who decided maybe you didn't want to be racist and you just, had no problem with black people moving in, you had great incentive to leave anyway, because the property values in your neighborhood were going to decline.
Because when black people moved in, the property values, because partly of federal housing policy, would actually decline. Right. So whether you're racist or not, people are moving out. And so he buys...
So that's what happens today. Like there's some lake and black people moved in by the lake and the white people are trying to run, right? Some of the white people are running because of the property value. They want to get back for their investment what they put in, because black people entered the neighborhood because this is the way the government's set up, and some people are just racist and they want to live in a community without blacks, so go home to Europe.
White people, if you are an individual who decided maybe you didn't want to be racist, had no problem with black people moving in, you had great incentive to leave anyway, because the property values in your neighborhood were going to decline.
Because when black people moved in, the property values, because partly of federal housing policy, would actually decline. So whether you're racist or not, people are moving out. And so he buys on what's something called a contract sale, which is just basically a straight hustle. Again, yoink.
Right, yoink again. Basically it is all of the problems of renting with all of the problems of buying, and none none of the rewards of either. At any moment, should you miss a payment, the person who holds the lease can immediately take the home from you, keep the down payment, keep all the payments that you've made up until that point. And in fact, they set it up so that that was what would actually happen.
They are trying, so basically this person comes in and does a contract sale, and I am both the seller and the lender. Right. And
Although I don't tell you that. I don't tell you all that.
I don't tell you that, right? And you are now working.
Do you understand that? That's a con move. You're the seller, right? You're the what? Insurance agent? Like you know, what, 21st century and all that stuff, right? The home sign that goes out, and you're the lender. Because they secretly don't know you're the lender. They are only dealing with you on the, I'm selling to you. I'm the salesman. But secretly you're the lender, and you've written it in so that if you fall behind on any payment, I can choose to either let you make up that payment, or I can choose to take everything back. Do you understand that? One more time.
Thing called a contract sale,
yes,
which is just basically a straight hustle. Again, yoink.
Right, yoink again. I mean, basically, it is all of the problems of renting with all of the problems of buying and none of the rewards of either. At any moment, should you miss a payment, the person who holds the lease can immediately take the home from you, keep the down payment, keep all the payments that you've made up until that point. And in fact, they set it up so that that was what would actually happen.
They are trying, so basically this person comes in and does a contract sale, and I am both the seller and the lender. Right. And
Although
you're
I don't
working.
Tell you that. I don't tell you all that.
I don't tell you that, right? And you are now working your way out of debt to me. And if you miss a payment, I can say, you missed a payment, I'm taking all the back money you paid me, even if you paid 80% down on the house, and the equity of the house, and I'm putting you out.
That's exactly what happened. And this is serious. I'll just add this really quickly. I got a call from my mother this morning, and I don't want to get emotional here, but I grew up in West Baltimore. My grandmother lived in West Baltimore. There was a home I went to every day after school. My grandmother bought that home on contract. And I didn't even know that until my mother read the story and, explained that to me. My grandmother was Clyde Ross. Basically came up, raised 3 kids in the project, sent them to college, worked cleaning white folks' floors, and managed to buy a home. And this is the only way she could do it. It's a very similar story.
And so the what the result of the plunder, right? The argument is we had slavery, and you don't even actually linger on slavery that long. Right?
No,
it's not that big a part of it.
Give you that.
Right? It's like, okay, slavery. Right?
You don't want to buy the reparations for slavery.
See, that's the whole thing. Like people, he's putting his 2 cents of the argument in. If people don't want to hear slavery anymore, all right, fuck them. This is what the evil that you committed after slavery, because slavery was so fucking evil, you just don't want to even acknowledge anything about it. Well, what about all this, from Jim Crow laws to, debt peonage? What about these things that he's actually bringing up? Literal plunder. Murder. What about murder? Is that reasonable to white people anymore? Or is it only if you murder somebody that's white today? See, that's my problem. The double standard. We all got heartbeats, right?
Okay, right. So let's talk about plunder just in the 1950s, right? So, okay, what we have created is this wealth gap, right? This and there's this great Chris Rock meditation on what wealth means I want to play, because I think it really gets something key here. Hey,
has anybody ever just taken anything from you? Look, I'm not saying have you ever been raped or anything like that. Sorry if I'm not trying to upset people on that kind of level. Has anything ever been just taken from you? I want you to think about that, because if something has been taken from you today, sometimes it's illegal, sometimes it's legal. You've got to understand, when something's taken from you, there is sort of a depression that sets in based on the thought of balance of justice. If you feel like you can get justice for this action against you, then there's a spark inside you that's lit, and you strive for that justice. But if you feel what's been done to you like there's nothing that can ever be done, there's 2 ways to handle it. You either roll with it, which most people can't do, no matter what the fuck they say. They really can't. Or It troubles you and depresses you and affects your personality. Now imagine, there are hardworking people, work their ass off. Horses, pigs, I don't care what they bought, they still bought it. Then they're denied access of protection. See, this is the main thing. Thomas Jefferson said, "I will write your asses out of the law." Lincoln said, "You're free, get the fuck out of here." Obama's about to say, "Shut the gate." We are running out of time.
Take a listen.
I'm not talking about rich. I'm talking about wealth. Because wealth will set us free, okay? Because wealth is empowering. Wealth can uplift communities from poverty, okay? Wealth is passed down from generation to generation. You can't get rid of wealth. Rich is some you can lose with a crazy summer and a drug habit.
Right, wealth is this thing that there's this stability to it, and one of the things we see is this unbelievable gap in household wealth between white people and black people. Even when you normalize for income, even people with master's degrees or law degrees, you normalize across these things. We see this persistent racial wealth gap.
Right, and this is the thing again. Just to bang on this, inequality is a very big problem in America and in the world, right? And it's something that, obviously we believe in the fight against inequality, but this is not just a matter of poverty. Racism is an actual real thing with actual consequences, and the wealth gap is the biggest illustration of that.
I need you to understand something. I'm going to go back a little bit. Everything that they complain about black people today, they administered onto us after we taught them. They came here, they couldn't even farm the land. How do you leave land and not be able to farm new land? That doesn't even make sense. Are all these people affected by the curse of Cain? Listen again.
This rock meditation on what wealth means I want to play, because I think it really gets something key here. Take a listen.
I'm not talking about rich. I'm talking about wealth. Because wealth will set us free, okay? Because wealth is empowering. Wealth can uplift communities from poverty, okay? Wealth is passed down from generation to generation. You can't get rid of wealth. Rich is some you can lose with a crazy summer and a drug habit.
Right, wealth is this thing that there's this stability to it, and one of the things we see is this unbelievable gap in household wealth between white people and black people. Even when you normalize for income, even people with master's degrees or law degrees, you normalize across these things. We see this persistent racial wealth gap.
Right, and this is the thing again. Just to bang on this, inequality is a very big problem in America and in the world, right? And it's something that, obviously we believe in the fight against inequality, but this is not just a matter of poverty. Racism is an actual real thing with actual consequences, and the wealth gap is the biggest illustration of that.
Black graduates twice as likely to be unemployed as white college graduates. I saw a crazy statistic.
Twice as likely. You saw the man in 1920 pay twice the amount for the home. You've heard black people say to you, you've got to work twice as hard as white people to be successful. You're fucking seeing it in the numbers. You're seeing it on film. If you're watching this fucking video, you're probably unsuccessful. No bullshit. I'm not mocking you. I constantly tell you how unsuccessful I am. It's stacked against you. It's a wall built. It's transparent. But it blocks out color. It's really happening. It's constantly been going on. It hasn't changed, except it's getting worse. Tell me you see the pattern. tell me you know you got to pull the eject lever. Hit the eject button. You must leave. I don't care if you go across that border right now. You must leave. I do care if you go out to the desert. We go out there legally. Claim stuff. Set up a camp. Somewhere close to a water supply. Joshua and Moses cross over to this land. Moses dies. They attack Jericho, which is in Utah. Achan steals the wedge. Achan steals the wedge. Digs it into his tent. Then feels guilty, then confesses, and then he says, hey, Moses says, hey, the Lord says, slaughter your whole generations. One of our viewers, Linda says, read Joshua 4, chapter 4 through 8. I browse through Joshua and I already know. When they show you those bodies discovered that they think they're sacrifices, those aren't sacrifices. That's Achan's family covered by rock. Put into a cave and covered by rock. Our Bible tells us every set of bodies that are out there in the Utah desert. Our Bible even tells us in the lake of Merom in Indiana that those are Hittites and Moabites. I already showed you the article says Ice Age discovery. Just because it says Ice Age don't mean it happened 20,000 years ago. That Bible says these conquests happened in the last 6,000 years. They find these bodies turn to dust. You got to understand what's going on. They took our land from us. Why, we set up treaties for them to be able to put a foothold in it. Give them an inch, they take a mile. Give them the mile, they take the nation. Somebody famous said that once. They died before we ever heard about them. I just got that feeling. You've got to really see what's going on. There's no hope. You don't have a year. You don't have a half a year.
For all college graduates, same age range, employment was 5.6%, 12.4%. You go through all the ways in which race, not socioeconomic status, not poverty, right?
Well, see, Chris, I think the thing, we're laboring under a dangerous illusion, and this was really one of the motivating features for this essay, and that is that if you're black in this country and you play by the rules, you go to college, you get married, you delay having kids, you'll be okay. You probably will be okay, but you won't be equal. It won't end inequality. That's not a solution for ending. That's good advice for individuals, but that's not an anti-inequality.
But the argument you've gotten from Barack Obama on responding reparations, you get from white liberals, you get from conservatives, you get from some black liberals, you get from all sorts of people is basically anything like reparations is completely impracticable, A. And
you get that? No matter who he talks to, they say, fuck no to reparations. It's a carrot tied to a string on a fishing rod. We don't see the string and we don't see the fishing rod. Restitution, blood money. These are different legal terms that we should have been investigating.
We've had all sorts of redistributive programs in this country. We had the war on poverty. We got Medicaid. We had the Great Society. We've had all kinds of Head Start. We've had all kinds of redistributive policies that have redounded disproportionately to the benefit of black Americans, if black people are disproportionately poor. And so, we're doing it. We're trying. We're redistributing.
Look how pissed he looked, dude. When he's saying we're doing it, look how pissed he looked.
And B, we've had all sorts of redistributive programs in this country. We had the War on Poverty. We got Medicaid. We had the Great Society. We've had all kinds of Head Start.
Blinking like
all
that?
kinds of redistributive
Can't accept
policies
that shit.
have redounded disproportionately to benefit Black Americans, as Black people are disproportionately poor. And so, we're doing it. We're trying. We're redistributing.
Yeah. Well, first, just two quick things. The president gives the argument that and with all due respect to President Obama, he gives the argument that you expect President Obama to give. I don't expect President Obama to come out and support reparations. In terms of the impracticality argument, all I can say to this is the following. In 1859, Frederick Douglass was arguing for the liquidation of trillions of dollars of wealth in the form of human slaves, okay? I can't think of anything that was more impractical than what Frederick Douglass was arguing for. It happened, though. And right now, if you talk to anybody, they would say Frederick Douglass had to correct their moral position. Everybody would say that was total.
You hear that? The value was in us. We were the stock. And Frederick Douglass argued for the liquidation of the stock, meaning emancipation.
The right thing to do. I'm just not particularly swayed by that.
You think the moral case is compelling enough here that whatever practical aspect...
I think we can do what we want to do. That's what I think.
You see that? If he could liquidate trillions of dollars, meaning your ass, our ancestors, through series of speeches, then why can't we do the same now? We can do anything we want to do. Not with a gun in our hand, but with a pen.
We decide a world in which we decide.
So what's that? So what does that look like, right?
Well, I mean, the first step, as I outlined in the article, is support John Conyers' bill H.R. 40 to study enslavement and the effects and the legacy of enslavement, and see what remedies might be possibly there should we find something wrong. And a lot of people get frustrated with that. They want me to have an outline.
Yeah. Name a dollar figure, right?
Exactly. But we haven't even studied it. I mean, you got to get your hands around the actual problem. Look, I did what I could. You know what I mean? I spent 2 years looking at this, and I tried to do the best that I could. But we need an actual serious study. I mean, this is a huge thing. I mean, to calculate not just enslavement, but to calculate housing discrimination, to calculate, school segregation, to calculate criminal justice policy, to calculate all of that and figure out what the effect has been on African Americans and how much of that we can actually pay. I mean, this is a huge deal. This is not a small...
See, the problem is we do that, and they're going to say, okay, we the people today owe you, and then they'll bullshit this with a sales tax. And then the people that live side by side with us today will have to pay us for for what their ancestors did. Now that, listen to me very carefully. Now it's time for some face-to-face. That is bullshit. The white guy that lives over here ain't done fuck shit to me. I want the Queen's money that they stole from us. I want the Spanish gold they took from us. I want the people from each nation that are ours. That is on the lines of reparation, repair, repare. I want the descendants of the people you took away. The Spanish gold. I want the Portuguese gold. I want what you took. I want it back. I'm not taking one fucking dollar with Washington's face on it. I want the medal.
Small thing.
Right.
So I did what I could.
You got the one historical moment in the essay that I did not know at all was the very heated debate in Israel as a young nation about the reparations from Germany. And there was this huge conflagration over it.
Right.
And one of the things that was fascinating about it is Germany ended up paying reparations, and that investment was key.
Right.
It was key to a young nation in its electrical grid and all these things. Right. Investment and wealth, as Chris Rock said, wealth really does matter. Ta-Nehisi Coates from The Atlantic, the piece is The Case for Reparations. It's an absolute must-read. Thanks, man.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for your help, Chris. Seriously. Thank you.
Coming up, it's not often we get...
All right, so again, analyzing what the Germans that are pretending to be Jews and the Poles that are pretending to be Jews did is one way to look at restitution, or if you'd like to look at it as reparations, but it's a carrot. It's a carrot. The money from the railroads. We want the stock value. The Aldermans, the Aldridges, the McCormicks. You think I forgot these names? The day I forget one of these names, I'm going right back to that book and reading them right out of it. The Ghouls. Come on. You think I'm doing these videos for nothing? Now let's look at the Caucasian side of it.
James Garrow, PhD. Tell us how the story... Dr. James Garrow, PhD. Tell us how the story unfolds, what you were told. Then I want to get into saving Chinese girls before they get smothered or used for medical.
Alright, it's just going to be funny for a second. Hold on. Oh, it's acting funny.
PhD, tell us how the story unfolds, what you were told. Then I want to get into saving Chinese girls before they get smothered or used for medical experiments. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks, Alex. I hope you can hear me fine.
Yes, sir. We got your video Skype and got you on phone. Tell us a little bit about yourself, for those that don't know, and then get into what this military officer told you, this individual.
Well, okay. First of all, I'm an educator, but a businessman. I operate schools in China, and in the past, I've been a college president and the Teachers College principal here in Canada. So my background is education, but I also am involved in business, of course, in the country of China. I probably have the largest network of schools, foreign language schools in China. And the elites send their kids to our schools. So we know a lot about what's going on directly from the Chinese elite, the leaders. Hu Jintao's niece was in one of my schools, and the current leader, Xi Jinping, his daughter was in one of my schools, and of course is now in Harvard. But that's beside the point. But that gives you a little bit of background on me.
And I should have added, you've gotten 45,000 plus, and we actually, David Knight has adopted children from China who would have been disposed of, girls. So he vouches for you as well. I mean, I know who you are, but he says you're certainly the bona fide. So thank you for that information and saving 45,000 girls that the UN and the eugenicists say are worth nothing because they're such big feminists. Now let's get into this officer, what they told you, and elaborate on this information.
Shall do. I got a call the day before yesterday in the morning from this officer, former officer. He's retired, but he was quite upset that one of the people he'd encouraged to join the military was being squeezed out, that he was forced to resign his commission. And it was because a question was asked of him. Now, I've called it a litmus test, but basically what it is, he was asked if in a scenario, if in a situation where the military was called upon to go and confront people who were armed, American citizens who would not relinquish their arms, in spite of the Second Amendment right to hold arms, would you fire on American citizens? This gentleman related to me that the officer was totally flummoxed that he would be asked this question, and he said his answer was no, I would not fire on American citizens. And he was forced to resign his commission immediately.
Amazing. Tell us more about, to quote you here from the article, you basically described him as one of America's most foremost military heroes. Can you give us an idea about this person? Is this person going to go public? Can you tell us what else he relayed to you?
Well, we had an hour-long conversation, so it ran the gamut from talking about the transparency or lack of, the manipulation of the mindset of the public as a result of a media that no longer actually reports news, but now spouts Obamaism. There was that part of the conversation. His concern, though, was that the military was going to be put in an awful position where they had to look at the oath they had taken, look at the officers who were also required to give an oath to obey the orders given by those above them, including the commander-in-chief, which would make it Obama. And if those orders were, in fact, to kill American civilians because they would not give up something they had a constitutional right to in the Second Amendment, namely their guns, he was afraid that so many would be leaving the military that it would leave a vacuum, actually, in fact, for people who would really be swearing allegiance to a new king, a new dictator, Obama. And that was his concern. This man is a legend. Yes, you would know his name. Every American would know his name. And no, he will not be coming public. He'll not be bringing it out in public. He thought that the best thing he could do is put it out in a different way. I was honored that he called me.
So it's not somebody like Boykin?
I can't give you the name. He's asked me not to. So in honoring that request, I won't answer that.
Well, I know several generals, and he'd be at the top of the list. And by knowing him, I know people that have worked with him, made films with some of these generals. And there's only a list of 4 or 5 that I know that would probably start talking about something like this. I mean, I know they're training for it. I have the video. I have the training manuals. It's really not a secret. And I've had military call in who said, we've been asked, are we going to fire on citizens? And then we're shipped overseas if we won't, or kicked out. And they're forming and then basically sheep dipping, making them quasi-CIA, Homeland Security, domestic, kind of NKVD units. And I got news for the establishment. You'll be able to kill Alex Jones, take out Ron Paul in the first wave. Once you kill the Canadians, I would not want to be anybody in a government uniform at that point. And that's part of the plan, too, a civil war. I want to talk about your hour-long conversation with this person and where the military is training to kill us and take our guns. I mean, obviously, Obama's controllers, the foreign globalists, they know this is designed to destroy the military and police, which is what you said. It gets rid of them because you're still going to have bad officers commanding them, and then brings in the new forces. Is it not, my king, time to spring a trap?
No, we must desecrate the soul and the flesh of the Queen's country.
Did you hear that?
The chain of life broken forever.
It said, decimate the soul of the Creator's creation. Isn't that the children of Israel?
To all beauty.
What else, Dr. Garrow, can you relay to us in this hour-long conversation? And why did this senior household name, for anybody that knows military, one of America's foremost military heroes, to quote you, why would they come to you, I mean, I know he knows you, and tell you this information and then say, get it out there, but I can't say, and then relay other things that he told you?
Well, I would suggest that he's talking in fear, that he knows that the Obama administration has a circle of death around them in terms of, I use that term because that has been said to me, because there are people who have met with an unfortunate fate, who have dared to cross Obama. But this gentleman came to me. I've known him for about 17 years, and he came to me as a result of the fact that he had read the book that I had just written about my work saving baby girls in China. And he had called me, I suggest about 3 months ago, saying, hey, I bought a copy of your book. It's wonderful, da-da-da-da. And that made the connection. So the other day when he called me, he was just saying, Jim, look, I know you're connected with all sorts of people. You're on the net. You know how to do all these things. Would you put this out for me? And I said that it would be an honor for me to do that.
Well, obviously, he's risking his life putting this out because the info's out there. And a lot of these older generals, he came to you because he doesn't understand the internet completely. and how it works, they still, obviously he knows the NSA is going to track this back. They're going to know the relationship. Obama knows. And, I guess he thinks that if he just puts it out there an intermediary, they won't go after him. The danger is now not going public full bore. That's when they come after you. But if they kill this foremost military hero, living hero, then everybody will know. In a way, I guess it's good that he did talk to you. But what else did he say about this other person he got to join the military years ago, now being asked if they fire on U.S. citizens? What else did he tell you about the plan to come after us?
Well, that's basically it. He was reflecting back to me what was being said to him about this poor fella who he'd encouraged to get involved in the military, and the man had gone up the ranks. Suddenly, this litmus test was being put in front of him, and it was either you're going to agree or you're not. You're going to get squeezed out. So his concern was that good, loyal Americans who had decided to give their lives to the country in the service of the country were being put in such an awful position. This is the kind of thing that you would expect to have a test of loyalty, as it were, for people who were involved in Mao's regime, or down in Chavez's regime, or somewhere else, like the Nazis. This is the kind of thing they would have done. This isn't what happens in a democracy. This isn't what happens with people in the services, serving the nation, putting their lives on the line. This is just not what happens. So the shock here is the knowledge that this isn't just one person it's happening to. This person came forward. This person is somebody of integrity. But my goodness, it's not just this one gentleman. It's others and women who are put in this position of, and are now being asked the question, would you in fact do this? And that was the shock for this well-known American hero.
We're going to go to break, come back in a long segment, and get into what's happening in China and the authoritarianism over there, and what you've dealt with the killing of these little girls that you've been saving, but the countless millions you haven't been able to save, unfortunately. But I'm going to briefly, when we come back, break down for people and then get your take on this, that the military, and I've noticed even senior brass, they're experts in their area, but not in full spectrum. I know what the globalists are planning because I watch their propaganda, and they prepare the ground first before they do it. They have billed Obama as Lincoln. And now and I said this 4 years ago, now they're saying that he's going to have a civil war and be our God, be our king. That they've got this set up.
As we saw in Katrina, and as we are watching now in New York and New Jersey, the federal government can't and won't help you in a crisis. FEMA ran out of water and MREs in days. Electricity is still off to over 1 million people. The Red Cross, who is quick to beg for money, is now slow to react. Don't put it off any longer. Get prepared today. While you're on InfoWarsShop.com, check out these other great preparedness items. The Aquapod Kit lets you store up to 65 gallons of water, and your family will...
I know about a few of the generals that have met with people that I know who've been woken up now, mainly retired generals. I know about generals and admirals that have been shot and killed, in the chest and in the head multiple times, and it's ruled suicides the last few years. All the generals you've seen having to resign, having to step down, or resigning their commissions, admirals, heads of CENTCOM. The truth is our military keeps saying no, 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 no. Even hand-picked guys from West Point in the military 30 years who've got whole careers and everything ahead of them the last few years, they are resigning. And now shifting gears back to our guest, Dr. Jim Garrow. The big plan is this, and I've studied history, I've studied the Rand Corporation's writings, I've studied the writings of the leftists financed by the big banks that want a collectivist system for the grassroots, where the globalists are exempt from all the laws offshore, so they can then take our tax money as corporate welfare offshore, invest our pension funds in their fraudulent derivative scams to hold the entire financial system hostage. That's it in a nutshell. It's a corporate fascist system, a crony, anti-free market, capitalist monopoly system sitting on top of a lower tier socialism, communism, social engineering program. And I started seeing this 5 years ago, and I'm on record in Obama Deception 4 years ago. I'm on record in Fall of the Republic 3.5 years ago. 2 films about Obama, saying they're building him up as a messianic Christ. They keep saying he's Lincoln, he'll be like Lincoln, you'll see. And I said, they're doing that to later, if they decide to bring in martial law, say he's Lincoln who will crush the states. Then he creates the 10 region governors to say, oh, I don't need 50 states, I've got 10 appointed governors. He creates the rural council over communities all over the country. And I'm going to get our guest take on this. And says Homeland Security and the Pentagon is over that. And then we get the training manuals for it. It's gun confiscation. Okay, so this is totally, absolutely creepy. And now and I've done reports on this, we're going to do another this week because it's paramount. They're saying, he's Lincoln, let the states, and I even have an article here today, let the states not turn their guns in. Let the legislature say no. He's Lincoln and will crush a new civil war. Well, we're not going to start a war. They're going to go out and try to take the guns, provocateur stuff, a new Waco if they have to, and they're going to try to elicit a 1776. So that's why I got it out in the open on Piers Morgan and said it will trigger a new 1776, not to cause one, but to point out to everybody out there in TV, hey, this isn't going to be fun. Now, I'm going to shut up and go to our guest. As we went to break and I said that, he was nodding his head going, absolutely, that's what he said. So what did the general, because we know who you're talking about. I know who goes in these Christian circles. I went and did some searching. I think I know who the foremost military hero is. But again, I think he's made a mistake only going through you, his 17-year friend. The system, if I can figure this out in about 5 minutes, the system knows. Without even using phone tracking systems. So tell the general he's not stupid, that he needs to go completely public. But going back to you here, sir, what is your take on what I just said of the master plan? They plan to start a war using guns to then label all conservatives and libertarians the enemy, which is in all the Homeland Security training manuals that we got from state police and federal marshals. Go ahead.
You know, Alex, the only time I've ever seen you, and you know, I'm not a watcher of programs like yours, but the only time I've seen you was when I went and did a little bit of research, and I ran across this thing where you took on this British guy, Piers Morgan. You just mentioned him.
Yes.
And I thought, you know, you just fried the guy. You just fried him, but you put it out there with such intensity that I thought, you know, maybe I'm going to get fried today. I don't know. But you know what? You're hot, man. You're on the money. When you talk about them setting it up to take away the guns, and they're looking for the crisis. Come on, that's what Valerie Jarrett has been pushing Obama into. Create a crisis. And your military friends, they all are aware of what's going on. The nightmare for them, the nightmare scenario is having to turn their guns on American civilians because the new emperor, or at least the guy who thinks he's the new potentate, thinks that he can just go out there, crush the Second Amendment, crush the Constitution, and then crush anyone who gets in his way. What's been the pattern, Alex, so far? When people get in his way, what happens to them?
And that's because the globalists are taking over everywhere. He's their puppet. I saw a video of the Speaker of the House at a dinner groveling to Michelle Obama and her rolling her eyes and batting him away. It is pathetic how Congress sycophantically, through fear, is lining up to serve Obama. What did your military source say? Because when I walked out after the break, you were saying, that's dead on, that's what it is. Was the military source saying they want a civil war? Or were you agreeing with my analysis? Because we have all these top Democrats saying, we need a big crisis to make you king.
Alex, it was my military contact who said it is so obvious to him, so obvious to the man that was resigning, that what they were setting up was a takeover, a total takeover by Obama, and using the military to have it happen. And if the military will not, if they'll not give the right answer to this litmus test, they've got a whole army of young kids who don't know any better, ready to move in. And keep in mind, who are the people who get away with in the despotic times? Who are the ones that they rely on in the end? It's the young kids who don't know any better, but who can point a gun and kill people.
Wait a minute. So your military source knows about the FEMA Corps. Now, this isn't secret, but it's not well known to the public. Describe what he told you about that, about the Yugen squads from about, 17 down to 14.
Well, his words exactly were, here's the Hitler Youth being resurrected now under this name of Obama Corps. That's exactly what he said.
Oh, my, this is devastating. This is devastating. Because I've gone and looked this up before I got you on, and I know the big Christian circles you're in. 99% I know, and I've talked to you off air, and you're just like, nope, I'm not talking, but I know who this is. And I know other military officers, colonels and others that are saying the same thing. I've got family that told me years ago I was right about everything, but now won't even talk to me, who's in the Army. I mean, this is because they've been passed over promotion just because they're related to me. And I mean, this is amazing that this is going on.
Are you armed? Are you armed? Do you have armament?
Yes,
I do.
Gun? Yes, I do.
Well, you need them. And you know, the vice president of my company in the U.S. is a guy named Eric Rush, who happens to be a black guy who's a journalist in your country. Well, you know what I did for him yesterday? I purchased him an AR-15 and a sidearm because I am so worried about the things that are being said right now. He's out there putting it out through WorldNet Daily, I think's the name, putting the word out, letting people know the dangers of what, are you ready for this? What China is demanding of Obama.
No. China, we broke it a month ago, the Drudge Report, drudgereport.com link to it. Their People's Daily, I know you're in China and been there, you know it. Their TV said, you will, quote, have a war against your gun owners. We're ready to back you, and they're the biggest owner of the debt. And then I've got a Daily Beast article where they said, it's good that Piers Morgan is leading the anti-gun deal. We need to get Americans used to foreigners running things. I mean, this is insane. Go break down what's happening in China.
Oh, what's happening in China is they know, well, first of all, do you know that the Chinese call Obama the monkey man? Do you know that?
I've seen that in the news, yes.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with him being black. It has everything to do with the way they treat monkeys. Monkeys are like puppets in China. So Obama is looked upon as a puppet of China. That's how he's looked upon. And they know full well that when he comes hat in hand, begging for more dollars, they're going to make more demands. Were you the one who broke the news about the fact that in Idaho, they've set up this thing very much like Shenzhen, China, a special economic zone? Was that you, Alex?
Yes, we're one of the ones, and now Jerome Corsi has confirmed that all over the U.S., I actually visited some of these in my first film, they're setting up these economic zones where the government lets the Chinese government be tax-free, but then citizens aren't. That's the model in the future. Globalist will be tax-free, but we will be under Agenda 21.
Well, you know, I've talked to Joseph Farah about that. I've talked to Jerome Corsi about that very thing. You know, Jerry Corsi, he endorsed my book, and my book came out through Joseph Farah. But I'm telling you, the information that's available to some people about what's going on in China and how they're treating the American land and the American resources, they're treating it as this. It is something which they will be able to grab sometime soon. And so the fact that they now have 5 special economic zones throughout the United States, you've got to be aware of what's happening. The fact that discussions have taken place with Obama and some of his officials in China to talk about.
The NAFTA superhighway is their invasion route from the Pacific side of Mexico right into the U.S., and they're going to be brought in. I've talked to top officers, let's even in the Washington Post, agreements to bring in, under NLE 09, troops from 15 nations to quell domestic unrest. That's at FEMA.gov. Mm-hmm. And guess who was on the list of the 15 nations?
Who? Wouldn't be China, would it?
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm telling listeners. It's all, and people say that'll never happen. Once they start a civil war, it will.
Yeah, it's already happening. They're setting it up for civil war. They're setting it up to take away the freedom of the American people. And Obama, he doesn't believe in freedom. He doesn't believe you should ever have a gun. Thank God.
Well, what else did your military source... Because, again, if you're a new listener, folks, China officially said, quote, have a war against your gun owners. We will back you. In their biggest TV, state-run, and the People's Daily. I mean, they're openly saying this and saying, we own your debt. You take their guns. I mean, and then I've got a Daily Beast article saying it's good that foreigners are telling us what to do. In fact, I'm going to dig it up here. I'm trying to find it.
No, and you're absolutely correct, Alex. It's exactly what's going on. The Chinese are demanding that Obama take control of the guns because as they move in and steal the resources of America, buy them out in satisfaction of the debt, which Obama knows full well he cannot pay. When you know you're not going to be able to pay your credit card, why don't you run it up as far as you can? As long as they're saying yes, right? Get as much goodies as you possibly can. That's the mindset of Obama. Well, and he knows full well he will never have to actually pay the debt. All he has to do is say, hey, we've already shut down the oil industry. They're not drilling. We'll give you permission to drill. We've already destroyed the coal industry in America. So come, take the coal. You can use it. It's a better coal than you have in China. They need it. They need the resources of America, and that's what they are demanding from Obama.
And let's be clear about this. China has been maneuvered to be the biggest owner of our debt by the Federal Reserve, who set this up when they could have just monetized and paid the debt that way. Instead, they had the Chinese communists come in who kill, millions of their dissidents on record because they're the model of globalism. We're told by the CFR, China is the model, not the Chinese people, the authoritarianism. They use the slave wages, the Apple factories with the suicide nets, so no one can compete in the West to consolidate power in globalist hands. And then the Chinese People's Daily and their biggest TV station, we did a news article linked to it. Paul Watson was aware of it because his wife is Chinese, and she first alerted it. Paul went and found the actual English version of it. And they say, I've read this on air, listeners can go pull it up. In fact, guys, the headline's something like Chinese state-run media tells Obama to take the guns. Pull up the InfoWars for me, guys. Good job. I want to show viewers, radio listeners, pull it up. And they say, quote, wage war against the gun owners. Do whatever it takes. It's key. We've given you money. And again, they're going to be given the national parks. The land is collateral. That's all official. The Chinese communists were being conquered, and they're saying, hey, we own your people now. You take their guns. And now the UN treaty's coming up.
Did you hear that? They're going to give foreigners the national parks, especially out in the West.
Pull it up. And they say, quote, wage war against the gun owners. Do whatever it takes. It's key. We've given you money. And again, they're going to be given the national parks. The land is collateral. That's all official. The Chinese communists were being conquered, and they're saying, hey, we own your people now. You take their guns. And now the UN treaty's coming up. This is the master plan. It's so evil.
Yeah, it's funny, but I was told when I checked with my friends, I said, have you ever heard of this guy, Alex Jones? And one of my American friends said, well, he's a bit of a conspiracy theory nut. And, now I've come on, I've listened to what you've had to say, and I'm sitting here going, wow, well, this guy's not a nut. You have the information. I don't know where you're getting this, but I'm telling you, you are right on the money. And keep in mind something. Yamamoto was right when he said, you don't want to invade America because behind every blade of grass there'll be a gun. And the Chinese know full well that's exactly the situation with America right now. Obama knows, he's got his marching orders, he's been told to take your guns, he's been told to have your people crushed so that the Chinese can do what they want.
You're right, and we did find that People's Daily, one of the articles, where it says innocent blood demands gun control, and then it talks about waging war against American gun owners. But here's the article, peers pressure. Believe it or not, Morgan is a great spokesman for gun control. And the article goes on to say he is globalization 2.0, teaching us to basically go under global government. And it will only survive if we submit to this. This is amazing what they've done to us.
Oh, absolutely. You've been manipulated every which way but loose. They know full well that here's the other thing, the United Nations and the World Bank, in collusion with Obama, suppose he turns around and says to them or to the world community, you know what, we cannot meet the debt. Could you help us out here? Could you help us broker a fair solution and pay off the debt in some way possible, in whatever way possible? And the United Nations will be, and the World Bank will be glad to say, yes, we'll come in. In fact, let's just do this. Let's look at Idaho. Look what you got out there. You got all this open space. Let's look at Kansas. We need the breadbasket. We need to be able to grow grain.
And that's why they've got to have Obama as the head of the UN Security Council, violating Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8. That's why they admit in this Daily Beast article by Peter Beinart, who really shows he's a globalist, they've got to get us used to this. They've got to get us ready to go under world government. It's so incredibly sick that they've maneuvered us to this point. And by the way, they found it in the People's Daily. Punch it back up for me, guys. They found where it said Obama needs to engage in a protracted war. You guys just had it. You had it right on the spot with the war part. That's what I wanted to read on air. TV viewers saw it. There it is. Action speaks louder than words. If Obama wants to take practical measures to control guns, he has to make preparation for a protracted war and considerable political cost. Then they go on to say the Chinese government's ready to help. What do you make of that? I mean, that is just in our face.
Yeah. Well, here, keep in mind, yeah, it's an incremental thing. And that's what this guy is. Obama's all about incrementalism. What's he done to the American public? Would you ever countenance for 1 minute any man putting their hands on your wife? Would you ever? Wouldn't you deck the person who do that?
But now you do, TSA.
Every time you go into the airport, every time.
Stay there. We're going to come back. We're going to come back. You know what's going on.
Do you understand how dark it is? How far down the line we are? How late it is?
Mexican billionaires are lecturing us. That's good. I mean, you got to go read this. And then it goes on to say Al Jazeera's purchased current TV. That's good. It's good for us to go under foreign control. And then he says somewhere Alex Jones is readying his flamethrower. Let him. Because in the next round of the culture war, we will likely not just pit black and brown versus white. That's why they get on the news and say gun owning is racist. We're going to get the whites. That's why Rangel's saying whites are the enemy. You know, Southerners are the enemy. Gun owners are the enemy. And you're like, that's really crazy. You know, political correctness teaches everybody to be nice, which is, but then, again, this is all a plan. And secular versus religious. It will pit those Americans who can't accept the increased, let's just go to our guest. It says Alex is readying his flamethrower. Let him. They basically just say they're going to smash us. I'm seeing this everywhere, and I've seen this in the Weatherman FBI trials where some of them admitted to being in these meetings where they said, we're going to kill the libertarians and conservatives. They said, we're going to put them in re-education camps. We're going to bring the Chinese in to do this. I mean, this is insanity. But they're really, it looks like going to try it with the Civil War as the cover, kicked off by taking the guns. I just read that where they say, Alex Jones is our enemy. Don't worry, we're going to get him. I mean, Piers Morgan has said he wants to shoot me. What do you make of these people?
Well, you know, the Founding Fathers knew exactly what was going to come down the pipe. If ever people lost sight of why the Constitution was built the way it was, why the Republic was framed the way it was, and what you're doing, you are actually, you know, again, I'm back to this thing of where is this nutcase Alex Jones coming from? Well, you're not. You're on the money, and you are providing the protection that the Fifth Estate, that the people in the media should be providing the people of the United States by exposing the very things that you're talking about. There's a huge, I'm going to say it because there's the word, there's conspiracy, there's complicity all over the United States. And, you know, your poor military people are sitting there. They know, they are aware, they know the manipulation, they know the expectations that they will be called upon to move against the American people. These people are heart-sick. They're heart-sick of the portent of having to turn their guns against their own people. And so they're walking out in droves, Alex.
Which is part of the plan, because they already have the collaborators lined up ready to take over.
That's right. And by the way, one of the first people...
Well, they should say yes, they will. They should say yes, they will in this situation and infiltrate the New World Order. I mean, that's completely biblical, just like the spies visiting the city, and I mean that's got to be done. I say, just say, yeah, I'll fire on them, and then sit there and warn everybody behind the scenes. And I think that's the answer here.
Well, it would be great if they were left to that. If they weren't put in positions where they have to actually say no all over the place. And remember, these people are crafty. Look at Obama. Has anyone ever made Obama stand up in public where he was actually questioned about everything in his past?
No, everything's always staged. I mean, he's got 3 different names. Everything's sealed.
Yeah, what's with this? What happened to a legal system that, pulls back the onion and everyone has justice applied to them equally? Well, Obama, golly gee, what's gone on with him?
Amazing. James Garrow, we've got to have you back up again soon. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Alex.
PinkPagodaGirls.com.